I am an Extension Master Gardener Volunteer with the Dare County Cooperative Extension. In a previous presentation, we talked about native plants for the Outer Banks. Today, we're going to be talking about plants on the Outer Banks that attract year-round and migratory birds to your yard. Birds enrich our lives in many ways. They help keep pests in check, since many birds depend on them for food. Some are pollinators, such as hummingbirds. And many birds aid in seed dispersal in many ways. They're also fun to watch. Native plants have tight relationships with wildlife, formed over thousands of years, providing natural sources of food, cover, and places to raise young. Without these healthy native plants in the area, wildlife will have a difficult time surviving. This is just a short outline of what we're going to talk about in this presentation. Why go native, how to go native, additional yard attractions you can put up for the birds, and the native plants that will attract birds to your landscape. So why go native? Using native plants in the landscape is a way of sharing the places in which we live with the animals that evolved or visit here. Migrating and year-round birds are best adapted to native plants for food and cover because they have evolved with the plants. So a landscape using some native plants can help you attract more birds to your property. Plants native to an area are well suited to the local soils and, of course, our climate, and require relatively little upkeep once established on an appropriate site, and they have a greater likelihood of surviving and thriving on the Outer Banks. They also may be a little more resistant to some common diseases and predators. It's easy to fall in love with a plant that is considered a non-native. I've done that so many times. They can add beauty and diversity in your landscape. But before purchasing, do a little research on the plant to be sure it will not become invasive in our area. The spread of invasive, non-native plants poses a threat to our native plants and animals around the world. Without natural checks, a non-native species can invade the native habitat, crowd out our native plants, and reduce the diversity of foods available to birds and other wildlife. When at all possible, these invasive plants should be removed from the landscape and replaced with native plants. Now, some invasive exotic plants in North Carolina include mimosa, which is pictured here, Queen Anne's lace, Japanese honeysuckle, Russian olive, English ivy. There are a few more. They may produce berries or seeds that the birds will eat, but research on whether these foods are as nutritious for wildlife is still ongoing. With current human population growth, we are losing wildlife habitat at an alarming rate due to our agricultural and housing needs. You can help balance this loss by creating maybe a small little habitat in your landscape with native plants. Many common landscaping practices, like planting only one species across a large area, like a large lawn, for example, are actually bad for wildlife. By creating an integrated native plant landscape, like shown here in the picture, you can avoid having a property that provides little or no habitat for birds. A diversity of plants is closely linked to a diversity of wildlife in the area. For example, crepe myrtles, they're beautiful trees or shrubs. They are native to the Indian subcontinent, not North America. In their homeland, over 150 species of wildlife and insects use this plant. But in North America, only 5 species use it. Also, it has a low salt tolerance, so sometimes it has difficulty surviving on the Outer Banks near the beaches. So now, what do birds need? The types of food eaten by birds vary during the year and include insects and spiders, acorns and other nuts, seeds, fruits, and nectar. They require cover for nesting, roosting, hiding from predators, and avoiding harsh weather. Birds require water year-round and obtain it from a variety of natural and man-made sources. Now, in some cases, one of these basic needs, such as food, shelter, or water, may be absent or less available than the other two. This will limit the number of birds or wildlife that can occur in an area. For example, maybe cover may be a limiting factor for songbirds in a backyard containing numerous feeders and a bird bath, but no areas of dense vegetation for nesting or hiding from predators. It's important for you to identify this limiting factor in your landscape and find a way to compensate for it. Now, habitat needs for birds change with the seasons. Migrating birds, such as our buntings, cuckoos, flycatchers, orioles, tanagers, thrushes, vireos, and warblers, migrate north from early April to mid-May, and then migrate south in September and October. They favor areas of dense vegetation because of the protection from predators. Our resident birds, such as bluebirds, northern cardinals, chickadees, Carolina wrens, and mockingbirds, also need good cover as well as food and water. By providing this diversity of native plant species on your property, food and cover will be available throughout the year. Now, some birds have specific needs, such as our resident songbirds. In the spring, migrating birds feed on insects, on the leaves, migratory and our local birds feed on insects on the leaves of oak, black cherry, and other deciduous trees. While nesting, birds feed their young insects and spiders that provide the protein and calcium important to bone and tissue growth. Now, birds are able to segregate themselves vertically within a landscape. So including low-growing plants beneath a tree canopy allows shrub-dwelling birds like northern cardinals to live directly below treetop birds like the red-eyed vireos. Our hummingbirds, the ruby-throated hummingbirds, the only species of hummingbird that breeds in North Carolina, feeds on small insects and nectar from bright tubular flowers. They prefer areas of dense undergrowth and vine tangles that will protect them from predators. So how do you get started? First, you should record the location of the plants in your yard. Identify the native plants, the non-native plants, and those that are considered invasive. Before starting any improvements or adding any plants, take the time to observe and maybe even photograph the changes in your landscape throughout the seasons. Locate your sunny locations, shady and wet areas. Animals are predictable and will appear in your landscape at the same times each year. This kind of written record can help you to identify which areas of the yard are performing well and which may need improvement. Also, it gives you an idea of future management choices, such as when to clean out those nest boxes, maybe where to erect other feeders, and how to best maintain the native plants in your landscape. When you're thinking about adding some native plants to your yard, you have to consider your family's needs and the unique characteristics of the site, as well as your activities. You need to find that limiting factor that may affect attracting birds. And then by using this information you've gathered about your needs and wildlife needs, you can kind of create a plan for adding native plants to your landscape. Remember that creating a native landscape can be done in small steps. Rather than tackle the whole yard at once, you can start with a corner, the backyard, or just add one plant at a time, whatever is doable for you. Now, like I said earlier, each native plant is adapted to a specific range of soil types, light conditions, and moisture. A soil test will aid you in amending your soil appropriately because you want to place the right plant in the right location. Now, there are many nurseries in the area that are beginning to provide more varieties of native plants. Also, online are links to providers through the North Carolina Division of Forest Resources, the North Carolina Botanical Garden, and the North Carolina Plant Society. Using cultivated varieties of certain plant species generally are as desirable to wildlife as the native plants. But you should be aware that some cultivars have been bred and selected for qualities other than their value to wildlife. For example, flower color that can differ from the native plants may be less attractive to your targeted birds, or a shrub cultivar may be selected for the absence of fruit. Collecting plants from the wild contributes to the destruction of their natural habitats. And the chances of moving that plant and having it survive are very, very slim. Okay, be sure you have the right plant for the right location. Water those plants well until established, and that may take a few weeks to a month, maybe even up to a year, depending on the weather. When it comes to maintenance, prune shrubs and trees during the late fall or winter. You should never prune them during the nesting season, which lasts from mid-March through the end of July. Leave those old flower heads on the blooming plants so that the seeds are available to birds during the fall and winter. Avoid using pesticides. They will harm the insects as well as the wildlife. Lastly, remain patient. It generally takes 3 to 5 years before you see an increase in birds coming to your yard. Now you may consider adding additional yard attractions for the birds. Now, these attractions can also make your yard look nice and inviting. Feeders. There are a variety of different kinds of feeders and bird food available, depending on what types of birds you want to attract. The Cornell Lab of Ornithology provides online information regarding the types of feeders and food each bird in our region likes. This is a resource at the end of this presentation, and it is a great resource. A little hint though, almost all seed-eating birds love black oil sunflower seeds, which of course are available in most box stores as well as grocery stores. A birdhouse. It should be well constructed using untreated wood. You want the house to have a sloped roof, recessed floor, and drainage holes. That's to help keep the birds dry. The house should have thick walls and ventilation holes so it will help them regulate their temperature. Keep out predators. There should be no perches. Use a baffle to keep predators from climbing to the house, such as a collar, stovepipe, or a wire mesh guard. You need to have the right size entrance for the right bird. A small entrance hole for small birds will keep out larger predatory birds. Another attraction could be a bird bath. Once you have a variety of native plants in your yard and maybe some feeders and birdhouses, another way is to just add water. Birds need a dependable supply of fresh, clean water for drinking and bathing. Putting a bird bath in your yard may attract birds that don't eat seeds and won't otherwise come to a feeder. Now, the bird bath should be low to the ground, away from shrubs, but of course in the shade. Birds usually bathe and drink in pools and puddles close to the ground. But they need to feel safe from predators, such as cats, so put them away from places where cats or other predators could hide. You might consider putting sand or gravel in the bottom to provide some good footing, because sometimes those bottoms of the bird feeders bird baths can get a little slippery. They shouldn't be any deeper than 1/2 to 1 inch at the edges and 2 inches in the middle. Most songbirds need shallow water to drink and bathe in. In winter, use a network of sticks over the water or some extra, a little larger stones so birds can drink and not get wet. And remember, electric heaters are not really recommended. So if the water does get icy, throw it out and put a fresh bowl of water out at the same time each day. Resident and migratory birds rely on the native plants for food and shelter, especially to help them through the winter. Now, many different kinds of birds eat the fruits and seeds of the annuals, perennials, and decorative ground covers we will review here. We can only be showing a few of the types of birds that will need these plants. Many, if not most, wintering birds will need seeds to eat in the winter. Gaillardia. You see this plant, these flowers all over the Outer Banks. It's a beautiful plant, and many seed-eating birds eat the seeds of blanket flowers, including palm warblers, which winter on the Outer Banks. Palm warblers forage on the ground and in shrubs and trees. While they are here in the winter, they will be looking for seeds, berries, whatever insects they can find, and nectar. If you want to try to attract them to your yard with a bird feeder, they will readily eat sugar water, fruit, and nut pieces. Pink muley grass, that's just one of the many ornamental grasses that you might consider for your garden. Again, seed-eating birds are attracted to grass seeds, such as the mourning dove, which is here year-round. They forage almost entirely on the ground, but they might come to feeders that offer seeds, such as the black oil sunflower seeds. Tickweed, beautiful yellow flowers. Again, seed-eating birds, such as this indigo bunting, are attracted to the seeds. Now, they are summer visitors to the Outer Banks and migrate to Mexico and Central America in the winter. While the indigo buntings are on the Outer Banks in the summer, they are looking for seeds, buds, insects, and berries, and they forage in shrubs and on the ground. To get them to come to a bird feeder, they will readily eat safflower seeds, apple slices, suet, peanut kernels, and fruit. Verbena, a semi-evergreen plant. Bees and butterflies love this flower. Birds that like to eat nectar are also attracted to this flower. Orchard orioles are attracted to nectar. They are migrating birds and visit the Outer Banks during the summer. They winter in Central and South America. If you have a bird feeder, orchard orioles readily eat suet, jelly, orange halves, and raisins. Coneflower. Seed-eating birds again love this flower, including this American goldfinch. The goldfinch is a migratory bird, but Cornell Lab of Ornithology records are showing that goldfinches have been seen year-round on the Outer Banks. Rather than eating on the ground, the goldfinch loves to hang onto the flowers. It is one of the most vegetarian birds, relying almost primarily on seeds for food. You can easily attract them to your yard by not deadheading flowers, allowing the seeds to remain for food, and coming to a feeder, they will readily eat millet, fruit, and of course those sunflower seeds. Seashore mallow. Another one that seed and fruit-eating birds are attracted to for the seeds and also for the cover. The song sparrow is a year-round resident on the Outer Banks. Its diet consists of seeds, grass, berries, and occasionally insects. It forages on the ground. At a feeder, it will readily eat those sunflower seeds and mixed bird seed. Butterfly weed. Of course, this butterfly weed serves as an adult nectar source and a larval food source for the monarch butterfly. But those nectar-loving birds, such as the orioles, are also attracted to the nectar. Autumn sage. This is a semi-evergreen, and it makes good cover for smaller birds and, of course, provides nectar for the hummingbirds. This plant is also attractive to butterflies as well as the hummingbirds. A small bird, like the savanna sparrow, uses the bush basically for cover. It is a migratory bird and lives on the Outer Banks in the winter. It feeds on seeds, insects, spiders, and sometimes snails. Forages on the ground in the low bushes. You can attract it to your feeder by providing those sunflower seeds and mixed bird seed. Goldenrod, beautiful plant. This is another one that you see all over the Outer Banks. It is an important resource for overwintering gall-producing insects. Gall larvae provide an excellent source of nutrition in winter for birds, such as the Carolina chickadee or various woodpeckers. Chickadees live year-round on the Outer Banks and eat primarily insects, spiders, fruits, and seeds. They will readily eat suet from a feeder as well as sunflower seeds. Now, many vines provide fruit for birds. There is one vine that it is not recommended that you put in your yard, which is poison ivy, because the berries are very attractive to the fruit-eating birds. And we will go on from there. Coral honeysuckle, twining or trailing woody vine, is an important food source for hummingbirds in the spring. Ruby-throated hummingbirds live year-round on the Outer Banks. In addition to liking this honeysuckle, they also like petunias, nasturtiums, and lilacs, but lilacs don't really do well here on the Outer Banks. But they are often attracted to red-flowered species. And of course, hummingbirds like sugar water and nectar feeders. Virginia creeper. Some people think this is a weed, but its berries are very attractive to many birds, including the northern cardinal, a year-round resident. Cardinals are opportunistic feeders and eat a variety of foods, such as insects, fruits, and snails. At feeders, they will readily eat sunflower seeds, apple slices, nuts, and fruit. They commonly peel grapes in their bill to remove the pulp and seed, and then discard the seed. It's amazing to watch them. Carolina jessamine. Now, all parts of this plant are poisonous to humans, but the flowers are highly aromatic and attractive to pollinators, including the hummingbirds. It also provides winter cover for the smaller birds. The yellow warbler is a migratory bird that feeds mostly on insects and spiders, but will eat the berries. It forages in trees and bushes. You can attract it to a feeder by providing sugar water, fruit, and nut pieces. Muscadine grape. Fruit-eating birds love grapes. In fact, if you grow grapes for your own use, you'll need to get netting to keep the birds, raccoons, and other animals away. Cedar waxwing, northern mockingbirds, gray catbirds, and a variety of songbirds love these grapes. Now, cedar waxwings are seen on the Outer Banks all year. You can attract them to a feeder by providing apple slices, currants, and canned peas. But if you have grapes in your yard, they'll be very happy. Now we've talked about ground covers and vines. Now we need to move on to the mid-height plants, shrubs. You want to make sure you have a variety of heights available in your yard for cover, nesting, and feeding. Yaupon holly. You see this again, another plant that is very common on the Outer Banks. Birds, such as this eastern bluebird, are highly dependent on berries for winter. Eastern bluebirds are on the Outer Banks year-round and are usually seen in open woodlands, orchards, gardens, and fields. They forage from low perches. You can encourage them to come to a feeder because they'll readily eat raisins, currants, and nuts. American beautyberry. Love this plant. This cedar waxwing was seen eating the berries from the beautyberry bush that sits in front of the Pea Island National Wildlife Refuge. Cedar waxwings eat mostly insects, but in the winter will eat berries and fruit. And sometimes they can become intoxicated from eating fermented berries in the winter. They act a little crazy. Firebush, a large perennial shrub. Hummingbirds are really attracted by its flowers, and other birds feed on the fruit, both of which also forage on small insects found in the vicinity, helping to keep down pests. Yucca, another plant that is seen quite frequently on the Outer Banks. Now, Baltimore orioles, they primarily eat insects, but they also like fruits and flower nectar from the yucca flower. They are migratory visitors to the Outer Banks and are mostly seen in spring and fall. If you have feeders, you could attract them by using jelly, orange halves, nectar, and raisins. Dwarf sweet pepperbush. This really has beautiful, fragrant flowers. And of course, the flowers attract bees, butterflies, and the hummingbirds. The fruit attracts birds, such as the northern cardinal, and they eat a variety of fruits, seeds, and insects. Winterberry. It is a deciduous shrub, but during the winter, the small, bright red berries really brighten up a landscape. And of course, that fruit attracts birds. The eastern phoebes winter in the area and depend on these fruits and berries while they are here. You can attract them to a feeder, and they prefer mealworms. Inkberry holly, a little ignored evergreen, drought-tolerant shrub. The flowers and berries really do attract the birds. It provides good cover, and the Carolina wrens, they usually eat spiders and insects, but they depend on fruits and seeds during the winter. To attract a Carolina wren to a feeder, you need to provide apple slices and, of course, peanut butter. Brilliant chokeberry. Of course, the fruit attracts birds, including meadowlarks, gray catbirds, and cedar waxwings. Now, the eastern meadowlarks rarely come to yards to forage, but they have been seen in our neighborhood. It mostly eats insects, but it will also eat seeds and berries, including this chokeberry. It forages on the ground or in shrubs. It will not come to a feeder, but it may come to a bird bath. Pokeweed. A lot of people think this is a weed, and, but birds love pokeweed berries, and they often fight over a territory that has pokeweed. Great catbirds will stay around an area with ripening pokeweed berries and often fight. The gray catbirds, they live on the Outer Banks year-round. They normally forage for insects and fruit on the ground or in shrubs and low trees. Their song sounds like a sick or mating cat. You can attract them to a feeder with suet, sunflower seeds, or nuts. But if there is a pokeweed bush nearby with ripe fruit, that's where they're going. All birds need trees, even ground foraging birds. Trees provide cover as well as insects, fruit, and nuts. All the trees we are going to talk about today are native to North Carolina and are salt tolerant. Of course, you've probably seen these around here on the Outer Banks. Our majestic live oak. All birds love the cover it provides. Blue jays and woodpeckers eat the acorns. Now, blue jays live year-round on the Outer Banks and feed on nuts, fruit, seeds, insects, mice, and frogs. You can attract it to a feeder using cracked corn, suet, and sunflower seeds. Wax myrtle, which is an evergreen shrub or tree, and loves any type of soil. The yellow-rumped warblers here are migratory birds and are one of the few birds that can digest the waxy berry of the wax myrtle bush. For feeders, they'll readily eat sugar water, fruit, and nut pieces. Yaupon holly. Birds love the winter berries on the female plants. Now, several bird species, including mockingbirds, cedar waxwings, and robins, eat the berries. The American robin's diet is 40% insects and earthworms and 60% wild and cultivated fruits and berries. Of course, the robins live on the Outer Banks year-round. Bald cypress, another beautiful, majestic tree, provides cover for multiple species of birds. The wild turkey, wood ducks, waterfowl, and wading birds eat the bald cypress seeds. The cypress domes provide unique watering places for a variety of birds and mammals and breeding sites for frogs. The pileated woodpeckers are found on the Outer Banks year-round and prefer hardwood forests and eat mostly ants and wood-boring insects. Fruits and nuts. For feeders, you can readily invite them by providing suet, sunflower seed, sugar water, and fruit. Southern magnolia, an evergreen, beautiful tree. Many birds eat the seeds and use the tree for cover. This American redstart, it's a migratory bird that arrives on the Outer Banks July through October. About the same time the magnolia seeds ripen. Redstarts eat insects, spiders, berries, fruits, and seeds. You can attract them to a feeder by using sugar water, fruit, and nut pieces. Eastern red cedar. They're evergreen and they are good cover for birds. In winter, many types of birds eat the berries. House finches live on the Outer Banks year-round. They eat seeds and fruit. You can attract them to a feeder by using fruit, mixed bird seeds, and apple slices. American holly, another majestic evergreen tree, provides cover. Birds are attracted to the berries. There's over 18 species of birds that eat the berries, including this northern flicker. Flickers live on the Outer Banks year-round. They eat mostly ants, but also eat other insects, berries, and fruits. They forage in trees, shrubs, and on the ground. You can attract it to a feeder because they will readily eat suet, sunflower seeds, nuts, and fruit. River birch. The seeds are very attractive to the birds. It also provides cover. Brown thrashers. They're year-round residents here on the Outer Banks. They feed on insects, small amphibians, fruits, and some grain. In the winter, they will eat seeds, and you can attract them to a feeder by providing suet, sunflower seeds, and nuts. Water oak provides cover for birds. The small acorns it produces are eaten by a variety of birds. The eastern towhees live year-round on the Outer Banks. They eat insects, acorns, seeds, and berries. At a feeder, they will readily eat cracked corn, peanuts, and nut meats. This is one that has a clear, beautiful song. Persimmon. The fruit attracts birds. For example, northern mockingbirds. They're omnivorous, and they eat a wide variety of arthropods, worms, and fruit. They also eat persimmons, as well as the yellow-rumped warblers, gray catbirds, robins, and the woodpeckers. Now, mockingbirds have over 200 different songs and are very territorial. You can attract them to a feeder by using suet, sunflower seed, and nuts. Oh, sorry. That was a lot to cover today, but just a little recap here. Using your native plants in your yard creates a natural setting that will be easy to care for and will be great for the environment. More year-round and migratory birds will come to your yard if you use native plants to provide food and cover. These are the resources that I mentioned, especially the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. It is a great website to go to learn more about birds that you can attract to your landscape. If you have any questions, please call Ask a Master Gardener or at 252-473-4290 or email greenlineobx@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. Hopefully you have learned a little from this presentation about attracting birds to your backyard and using native plants for your Outer Banks landscape.